Welcome to the Wonder Women's Collective podcast. I'm your host, Gracie Hens. Before we jump too far into this introduction, if there's any chance that you could stop and give us a review or a comment or a like or any of the above on Spotify or Apple Music or wherever it is that you're listening to this, that would be so appreciated. We're completely unsponsored, so those reviews go a long ways. Also, I apologize, this is coming out on a Wednesday, not on a Monday. I am actually over in Spain at the moment, and so I was trying to upload the podcast yesterday and all of the power went out. So if you saw that in the news, yes, it did 100% affect everybody. I was on a phone call actually, and then everything just cut out. And I do have to say, I've done quite a bit of travel in my life, and losing all cell reception and power while you're trying to move Airbnbs and communicate with people, and the building that I was in also had one of those little keypads that has to have power, so I got locked out of my building. All of that to say, I think that might have been one of my new least favorite travel life experiences. So if that ever happens to you, I apologize. And if you're wondering, Gracie, why are you in Spain? I am actually over checking out some of the women's gravel race scene. I was already kind of going to be on a trip in Spain, and then I was like, oh, I should just go check out, some of these women's events that are happening before the Traca race. And yeah, it's been so fun. It's so cool to see so many people in one spot and just so psyched about being outside and moving their bodies and getting women together in different ways. So there will definitely be more thoughts and comments on that from me in the future. But yeah, that's the little almost 2-minute update of the podcast. And now getting into today's episode, I have one of my best friends, Emma McHugh, chatting about the period and menstrual equity research that she does. We met at school in San Diego, and this is one of those conversations that Emma and I have had so many times, and it is so cool being able to look back at where this whole project started for her and have it be in our school careers, and then how this has just gone on so much farther than what it started as. And it's also just one of those topics that I have heard her talk about it, and every time that we talk about the research that she's doing, I'm like, how have more people not heard about this? And can I please just record this conversation so that I can send it to every single person that I know? And so having her on the podcast is seriously just so cool, and I'm really happy that this conversation is able to be shared beyond just the two of us. So without further ado, here is the conversation. Well, to start us off, do you want to just introduce yourself a little bit and tell people how you spend your days?
Yeah. My name is Emma. I live in Point Loma in San Diego. Actually, no, I don't live in Point Loma. I live in North Park right now in San Diego. But this is kind of an interesting question because I feel like my life has gone through a lot of foundational change in how my days are spent very recently.
Mm-hmm.
But up until recently, I was working full time at a coffee shop, and also um I was also working full time at a school, but I was getting compensated for only 20 hours a week because that's what they had the budget for at Point Loma, which is a bummer, but it's okay because it was even how I got that job was, it was my dream job compiled together, so it's fine. But a lot of that I was doing was working all the time. But I live in San Diego, so it was also whenever I could going to the beach. I go to the beach as much as I can. It's been kind of cold here, so it hasn't been as much being in the sun or water activities for me, but I'm a collector. I like to collect things next to the beach, shells and rocks and all those things. So lots of that, lots of walks. I also just I feel like since October I've been traveling a lot, so my day-to-day has looked really different. Since October, I've been to 5 countries. So I've
Wait,
been
what?
walking around. I was in Sweden and Germany at the beginning of October. And then in November, I was in South Africa and then Malawi, then Eswatini. And then I was in Mexico last month.
I
So
think that just like goes to show how quickly this year's going by.
yeah.
Because in my head, I was like, oh yeah, you were in Swahili and Eswatini like literally 2 months ago. And I'm like, right? Nope. That was
Yeah.
December, right? Or was
Yeah.
that November? Or was that
It
November
was
and no, it was
it was
like
November.
Thanksgiving.
It was Thanksgiving. It was November. It was all of November. And yeah, in December also I went to Colorado. I went to Colorado on the way back from Malawi for a little bit, and then I went back to Colorado for Christmas to see my family and stuff. So I was just like moving around a lot. And I've been like camping a bunch already this year. So I move. I feel like my day to day is when I'm in San Diego, it's a lot of work, a little bit of play if I have the time. Um I have a lot of friends in San Diego still, and as you might remember, Gracie, I love to host a dinner party. So I feel like I it's still I try to get in the dinner party and making dinner for people whenever I can. That's my like fun that I do during the week. But yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like honestly when I'm in San Diego, it's a lot more I'm working a lot and getting a little bit of plan because I just travel. So I've been traveling so much.
Yeah. Well, and then it's also like prepping for like the next travel stint.
Prepping for the next, yeah, I feel like Mexico was, I mean, just the nature of how much I traveled really far places, going somewhere like Mexico is really easy for me. It's like, oh, that was only like a 2 hour flight. So it didn't really take it out of me. So I feel like since January, besides that Mexico stint, I have been pretty stable and getting into a normal flow.
Hmm.
But as of very recently, I'm now full time at the university. No more working at the coffee shop. But I just have all this time now to do all these things I didn't even know I had time to do, like get coffee with a friend before work, or I've been really consistent in going to my yoga classes, and my sister was in town, so we went climbing a little bit.
Yeah.
But so yeah, I'm getting more into like flow, which I honestly love a routine so much. I love when I can get a routine. And I also love when I'm moving around so much that there's no room for a routine. So I'm doing both.
Yeah, it's good to hear you're on the pendulum swing of like having more time though, because I do feel like having the coffee shop and working on everything else that you're doing was just like taking it out of you.
Yeah.
And like not having like evenings and now you have evenings
Yeah.
again and can like balance that out a little bit more. Okay, I need to hear about Mexico and just give a little bit of a brief introduction to everybody. What is it that you're working on?
Yes, so I do research in global South countries, which means it's like the politically correct term for developing countries or just really poor income countries. And I interview women about their periods, about like their personal experiences and stories and what products they use, how much information they know about their period, and how it affects the rest of their lives outside of just bleeding, their day to day. Um, and attached to that, when we can, like when I get enough funding, we bring period products and educate girls about them. And then if they want them, we give them to them at the end of our interviews. And we usually also try to make sure we can maintain a relationship so we can keep channeling money or just actual physical products so that the communities can keep getting them. And then also with all the stories, I do like presentations and little storytelling things on really small scale. Like all my friends know all these stories. And then on larger scales, I'm going to London at the end of May to present at a conference. So really exciting. But yeah,
Like,
but
what? Oh, that's exciting.
large scale. Yeah, I'm really excited. But I think that are there any details that you think I left out of it, or you think that was a
No,
good?
I feel like that's pretty good. That's a pretty good description. I feel like there's just like so many intricate, like it's all the intricate stories of everybody
Yeah.
that like really opens up this whole conversation. And like, because does the whole project have like a proper name yet? I was like trying to think. I was
Yeah.
like, okay,
Yeah. So
yes.
the project's name is it's Akinyi. It's spelled Akinyi. It's a Swahili word from the Luo tribe, which is a
Mm-hmm.
tribe in Kenya, and it means girl child born in the morning. And my very first research trip, I was in Kenya, and that's what my friend from Kongware started calling me, Akinyi.
Oh, that's cute.
It's like a little pet name, sort of. Most girls, like if you're, it's my middle name is Marie, the most basic middle name ever, and it's similar to that, but every girl who is born in the morning gets it, and I was born in the morning, so that's why I got that name. But named the project that because I liked it and because kind of the vision for all of this. Um, yeah, okay. So a few years ago when I was in school, I wanted to do a artistic demonstration showing what it was like to be on your period in poor countries all over the world. Since my background is in international development, I
Yeah,
like
well, and like, how did you even land on that first concept?
well,
Like the whole thing is just like such a cool story of
yeah.
like, yeah.
So yeah, when I was okay, yeah. So I studied international development, which is like sustainable poverty alleviation. And I didn't really know what my niche was going to be, but I knew like human trafficking was an area that I was spending a lot of time exploring. And then I had this assignment in school where I had to interview CEOs and executive directors of different companies, like my dream companies that I would want to work for one day. And I just kind of told myself I wanted to venture out of the anti-human trafficking sphere just for fun to like mix it up a little bit.
There's also a lot of information on human trafficking. Like,
Yeah,
not
there's
trying to bash on it because it's obviously exceptionally important,
important.
but I feel like it is one of those ones that like is really easy for people to just like pick up. Or like, I don't know, like the first thing that I think is like mega churches that are like anti-human
Yeah.
trafficking, which I'm like, yeah, they're doing so much good, but like it kind of has its spotlight in the world.
Honestly, I've used this like phrase before of being like I want churches to care about period poverty the same way they do about human trafficking because it is
Yeah.
like church's favorite thing ever. But yeah, so it's a big thing. It's also really hard to get your like the thing that the anti-human trafficking sphere needs the most is like social workers, not
Yeah.
I mean I'm not that. Anyways, so back when I was in high school, at my church youth group, we had this lady come and talk about period poverty, which was something I had never heard of. And she told this story about this girl or she was at an orphanage in Kenya and she was getting a tour. And there was this room that the orphanage director was like, don't go in there, stay far away from that room. And she's like, why? And he said, they're on their time of the month, so we leave them alone. And she was like, what are you talking about? Show them to me. And she walked into this room and there were all these girls sitting on cardboard squares. And he explained that that's where they went when they were on their periods. No one touched them. They like food was pushed under the door because they didn't want to make anyone unclean. And so from that, a lot of things happened. And then she launched her company. It's called Days for Girls. It's like they sew reusable pads and period kits and stuff and give them to countries. So it was a sewing project. We were sewing these reusable pads, and that was the first time I had ever heard or thought of that, which is crazy. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like whenever I talk to a lot of women and they're like, I've never thought of this ever, and I have my own period. And I'm like, yeah, I was just like you. And it's crazy that no one ever thinks about what we would do if we didn't have access to everything we needed. Anyways, so I was like, oh, I should reach out to that lady again. So I reached out to her, didn't get a response from her, but also just looked into different period companies. And this was in like 2021. And that I think was the same year that this documentary called Period End of Sentence came out.
Yeah.
Uh, I think it was in 2021 when it came out. And so the world was just starting to get ramped up about period poverty. So I talked to these company directors and they were just like this issue is huge. It's crazy. There's so much work that needs to be done. And we just need like people to be interested in it and to like start advocating and stuff. And I just kind of got hooked on it a little bit. And so I wanted to do this artistic advocacy campaign thing, raise some money, donate it to a nonprofit. And the thing I wanted to do was a artistic installation demonstrating what it's like to be on your period in all these poor countries across the world. I wanted to do 7 countries from all the hemispheres, and just like people like walk into a room and then you see all these different things. So I got approved to do that project by this program at our school that lets you do whatever project you want. But with the project, you had to write like a research paper with it that had peer-reviewed sources. So I went on Google Scholar and into our school catalog, and I'm like, what is it like to be on your period in Kenya, in the Philippines, in this place, in this place? And I couldn't find any research. So I told my professor, I'm like, just kidding, I can't do this project because this stuff doesn't actually exist. And my professor was like, what if you went and did it yourself? And I was like, I am a 19-year-old poor little girl. What are you talking about? And I've never done research ever with at all, let alone with human beings. And then a few months later, I was in Kenya by myself doing research.
Oh wait, this is like so cool to hear like retrospectively again, just like in this linear fashion, because like I don't feel like I haven't heard you talk about it like this, like
Yeah.
now it being 2025,
Mhm.
which is just like so, because was it Rob Gailey that was like,
I,
yeah, you should just go do that, and
yeah.
like I mean, even thinking about uh professor side. I mean, like, not every professor is just gonna say, hey, like, here's a crazy idea. You should go
You
do
know
that.
what? It was also, he actually wasn't the first one who, he said she should definitely do that. And he helped get it to happen. But it was actually Mark Mann, who I had only met once.
Oh, right, right. Okay.
I had only met him one time and
Yeah.
told him my idea. And he was like, I've never heard of this. This is crazy. And then I was like,
Yeah.
and he was like, you could go to all 7 countries. That was his like very first thing. But obviously that you can't go to, well, maybe you can go to 7 countries in a short amount of time. But
That would have been wild. That would
yeah,
have been, and you would have had to drop out of school.
totally. Totally. Because even, I mean, I went to Kenya during the school year, but yeah, it's crazy how that all happened. And then I graduated wanting to still do something. And Mark invited me to go on his sabbatical with him after in August. I graduated in May. He invited me to go on a sabbatical with him. He was supposed to go to all of the Portuguese speaking countries in Africa, and he wanted me to do my research and like basically use his sabbatical as my itinerary. And so that was my plan after I graduated. But then, due to lots of, I think it had to do with all of the structural change in the School of
Right.
Theology at Point Loma, he couldn't go on a
Mhm.
sabbatical anymore. So then he was like, never mind, at the end of July. So then I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. And I was applying for jobs and applying for school and not getting anything, working at a coffee shop. And then in August, he was like, there's a student who I think would keep doing research. And we had reached out to this donor a few years prior, or I guess a year prior, telling her about the research. And she was like, this is
Mhm.
really fascinating, but you need to interview more people. I interviewed 156 women the first time I went to Kenya. And
Which
she
is
said,
also just like you and people in Kenya, which is nuts because we'll have to go more into like
uh,
your experience in Kenya too.
of course. But so then she was like, but you need to go back to Kenya into these different communities also and get more research. Um,
Wait, also,
most
who was the do or not like who was the donor, but like how would did she get connected to the research?
um, I don't know if I'm supposed to say who
Okay,
it
never
actually is
mind.
or how she's fully connected, but basically just like a friend of a friend of
Friend of
this
a
really,
friend.
really wealthy
Yes.
woman who
Yes.
wanted to help. Yeah. Anyways, and we can get into it later, but like the research became much bigger, as you know, like when it happened. So then it was like, we need to do this. Research is crazy. This is groundbreaking research, and we really need to keep the momentum moving.
Mm-hmm.
So we went, so I went back to Kenya with a student just as like a volunteer the year after I graduated, and did a whole other round of research in the like rural Maasai communities and back into some slums. But so then we did that. Um, and then our nonprofit that we were working with, Nazarene Compassion Ministries, people kind of were like, this is really cool and you should keep going. And then more students were interested and they were like, we want to go to Malawi and Eswatini. So then I was working on them to coordinate all that, just for funsies. I was saying I was freelancing in like emphasis on the word free, like, and not getting paid for it, you know? So
Freelance, freelance research
freelancing,
work, no problem.
freelancing, yeah, fully academic research, you know?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I,
I like that.
I, then for, I had applied to a women's studies grad program that I could afford. And I didn't get it. I got rejected from it because none of the professors thought that it was like an interesting or deep enough topic. They're like,
It's so wild.
it's so wild. I like the women's studies realm has gotten, I feel like, kind of saturated with this like gender and sexuality
Yeah,
level thing, which is important, but the like basic need period stuff,
I
where
just got
there's
overlooked.
more research on like gender and sexuality than there is on period health and like how it affects poverty. Like that's crazy. That's insane. But that it's real. Anyways, so I just got rejected from that and I felt really great about myself, obviously. You know, I was feeling horrible, but I had applied for this job at Point Loma, a part-time role doing research for the Center for Justice and Reconciliation, which does like human trafficking research. And I was telling Rob Gailey about it. I know, funny full circle moment. I
Mhm.
didn't get that job, but I was telling him about it after I had interviewed for it. He was like, I didn't know they had that kind of money, that budget to hire someone like that. I wonder if I can do that. And then all of us, and then like he created this job with a higher title. And he said, look, you can have this job for the Center for International Development. That was basically that. So then that's why I started doing part-time work for Point Loma.
Yeah.
Um, and then yeah, I went to Malawi and Eswatini, and that was like really good work. And then another student who also is a coworker at the coffee shop, who I just yapped her ear off so much about this that her heart exploded for it too. And so then she was like, wanted to do it with me. And then we went to Oaxaca last month. And it's like momentum, super long roll. Yeah. So that's kind of where we came from, where we're at now.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's really cool to hear it like that and just like wild how much momentum like has been going and also just like thinking because I mean like it's so much work. Like
It's a lot of
you're
work.
you're bulldozing a massive boulder and now it's cool to see it like starting to like go down
Mm-hmm,
the hill.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
But yeah, no, I mean it's wild.
mm-hmm.
Okay, so tell everybody a little bit about like the Kenya experience
Yeah.
because like I mean, that really lit the fire of like going from just being this question of like, okay, there's no research on this. I'm gonna go and do the research. And like going into it, you did not expect
Mm-hmm.
what you then learned. And
Yeah.
like, yeah.
So, yeah, I kind of was expecting, or what I was expecting was like to hear stories of girls who didn't know what their period was and girls who couldn't go to school because they didn't have access to different products, which all was happening. Like half the girls that I talked to, of the like, yeah, like 156 women that I talked to, didn't know what their period was the first time they had it. And the different products they were using were like, they were using mattress filling and cotton and old clothes. And some girls who could like afford pads were sharing one pad with their sister, like for a full period, and getting really bad infections. And all these things were very real. Girls couldn't participate in like worship services because of the spiritual uncleanliness. All bad and real things that were happening. But the like biggest thing in one of my conversations, I was like, where do you get pads? Because most of the interviews were happening in slums, and a slum is like a it's also called like a shanty town. It's similar to like it's basically an unofficial town made up of like tin roofs and walls. Maybe you can imagine it. Look it up if you don't know what it is. But those were the places we were in, like very poor areas without a lot of access to electricity or water, all these things. And the stores were not like stores how we would see them, think about them in the US. They were like in these little tin things. So I'm like, are they there? Do they sell them there? What do you like? How do you get pads? Because all of them like pads. That's their favorite thing. And they were saying, well, like if we can afford them, we buy it from them, or sometimes a friend will give it to you. But if you can't afford it, you just have to like go and get some boyfriend. And I'm like, what does that mean? Go and get some boyfriend. And they're like, well, like if you can't afford it, you go up to one of the Boda men, which is the like archetype bad guy who drives motorcycle. They're like, you go up to a Boda man, and if you have sex with him, he'll give you a pad in exchange. And I was like, whoa, what are you talking about? And from then, this huge door opened of all of these women being like, this is what all girls have to do to get pads. And of those 156 women I talked to, 94.6% of them themselves personally or their friends or their sisters trade sex for pads on a regular basis. So I met like pregnant like 10-year-old girls who were like, I needed a pad. And so I went and had sex with this man, and then he gave me a pad and I got pregnant. And I got AIDS. Or like just in general, like really young girls having sex with really old guys because they're too ashamed to talk to their parents about their periods, for like real fear that they'll get abused if they talk about it, because of periods being associated with like maturity and you not being a girl anymore and becoming a woman and meaning you can have sex, and just like all these horrible taboos around periods, making it so scary to talk about in your family. So girls are the only option they have is to go to these men who are abusing their fear. So that's like a huge statistic, and that's a really sad statistic, and I had never heard of that before. And that's something.
Is there any, I mean, I've heard this statistic from you, but is there literally any other statistic out there that like
So that was
brings
my
that
like,
backed up?
so I'm like, I am 19 or 20 years old at the time. I'm like,
Yeah.
how have I never heard of this? I like got back to I was staying with these missionaries, and I'm texting Rob, and I'm like, did you know about this? You like grew up in Africa, and you are the smartest person when it comes to poverty alleviation. Like in his
Yeah.
class, he talked about how investing in women and girls, especially their health, is like one of the keys to poverty alleviation. And he's like, I've never heard of that before. And I go up to the missionary wife, so angry, like so infuriated, being like, why did you not tell me? My heart just like broken. Like, why did you not warn me that I was going to meet young girls who have to trade their bodies for like less than 25 cents? Why did you not tell me or warn me about this? This is the most like gut wrenching thing I'd ever heard. And she was
Mhm.
like, I have lived here for over 20 years, and her role was women and children's ministry. And she was like, and I had no idea that was something that happened. And I was like, what do you mean? What do you mean? This is like the biggest thing ever. What do you mean? And then I go online, I'm like, sex for pads in Kenya and in the rest of the world. And there were some like anecdotal mentions of it, like a quote here or a quote there, like, but it always often was wrapped up into like transactional sex exists in poor countries because people are poor, which is bad. That's bad. That's like women's only because they have no access to jobs or like dignity. The only thing they have is their bodies, and so they can like use it for monetary value. That's bad already. But the fact that like for a single pad, that's crazy. That's so small. That's so crazy. And it's happening so much. There's not like, there should be extensive research and extensive advocacy on it. There's like, I found one study that existed in Kenya that like mentions the potential link between HIV and period poverty, which is what I'm like, there's
Yeah.
definitely a link. And it's very theoretical. It's not like nothing has they haven't actually figured it out because they haven't there's no
Spent
funding
the
for
time
it.
actually looking
Yeah.
into it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, which is just like wild when you take a step back and you just like it is such a simple thing where it's like, okay, like if World Health Organizations were just saying it in that way or able to just, have the
Mhm.
knowledge and then like put resources into actually just like making pads and period care
Yeah.
accessible to people, like it's just that cycle. And it's just like crazy
Yeah.
that like people haven't gone in and tried to do more about that until you step into it. And like,
Totally.
yeah.
And because that my other in the sustainable development goals, the UN has their goals that are like clean water, zero hunger, gender equity, and like education, reproductive health care is in there. And there's all these subcategories that say like really specific things that the UN is encouraging people to do, like nonprofits pledge to do all these different things.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like access to reproductive health care, like condoms and like PEPFARs in there for AIDS and all these different things, but
Yeah.
nowhere is there even a synonym of menstrual health hygiene in the Sustainable Development Goals, which is like the most basic need half the population needs every single month for like over half their life. And it's nowhere in there. And then to also hear like this 18-year-old be like, if the government actually cared about stopping child pregnancies and unwanted pregnancies and HIV, they would have asked, why are young girls getting pregnant? Not what can we do to like help like men not give sperm out or something. So their solution, she's like, if they would have actually cared, they would have heard that the reason why girls are getting pregnant is because they need pads. It's not because we need condoms. And also, nobody's using the condoms. They're not using them to prevent pregnancy. That's not happening. Also, because an 8-year-old girl doesn't know that she's supposed to use a condom because no one has told her how to have safe sex because she's 8 years old. And so she's not going to use it. She's not going to know that she needs to use a condom while she's trading sex for pad. It's up to the responsibility of this old dude. And clearly he doesn't care. So we're like, the condoms don't work. I think condoms are good and important, but they're not working because girls were left out of the conversation of why all these things are happening. Yeah, it's
That's
a lot of spiral.
crazy, crazy
I know.
stuff. Yeah.
I know.
Yeah. So then you're in Kent. Well, and like the other piece of this too is like you fly there by yourself, you're by yourself, and then you're trying to process all of this.
Mhm.
And then like even the people that you're talking to are like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know this is happening." And so
Yeah.
like I mean like the like what that is having you just like have to process is crazy at this point.
Yeah. And like, ugh, the missionaries I was with, they like, I'm really grateful for the support that they gave me. And I was really disappointed in the way they like talked down on Kenyans. And it was
Mm.
super textbook. Like, I mean, they're older. It was like super old school white missionaries who were like, Africans are bad with money, so don't trust them.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was like just that was a weird environment to be processing that in. The whole like don't trust them thing was really weird. I met like two people in particular who I have like really great relationship with now from Kenya who live in the slums, who are like the exact demographic of people that are like be careful, don't trust them, who are like obviously totally fine, so trustworthy, and kept me so safe the whole entire time, toting me around Kenya. But I don't know. I went into like a weird like fight or flight or just denial of feelings mode while I was in
Yeah.
Kenya, especially the first time. I feel like I wasn't processing anything while I was there. And I'm a pretty like emotional person normally, but and that it would have made sense for me to like sob in a lot of these conversations, but I don't know. I think like I don't know, for some reason my heart was just not breaking the whole time.
Which is good because that's what that's what you needed to be doing.
Yeah, totally. But I think it was when I got back, I think the main way that I process a lot of it was putting all these stories into action of some sort. I did like an installation when I came back, and I did a really big presentation and wrote a really big paper. So I processed through writing, which is a way that I love to write. Plus I made these like big huge painting mural things, and then just talked to a lot of people about it, and then got to present at a conference. So I spent a lot of time dignifying a lot of these stories and making sure they like went somewhere and that momentum would continue. So I like used a lot of those stories to raise money for menstrual cups that we got to bring
Mhm.
back to Kenya.
When on that first trip, did you bring menstrual cups or was it
No,
the second trip?
it was the second trip. The first one, so okay, bringing a product to a country and dropping it on them is something that you learn. Okay, Gracie, you grew up in the church and you grew up around mission trips, you know?
Yeah.
Everyone goes on their week-long mission trip to go save the world. And they like bring candy and clothes and all this stuff. And that like actually really damages environments. The book When Helping Hurts, read it. It's really good if you care
Yeah.
about it. But so when I was there and I'm hearing all these girls are getting pregnant because for one pad, I was like, this is an immediate issue right now, but I don't know how to fix it because I'm not supposed to like buy something and drop something on a community. That's not a way for sustainable change. So I really struggled knowing what to do because I also was like feeling conflicted about if someone in at like school or someone was like, I don't have a pad and I need one, I would give them one, or I would go buy
Yeah.
one. I would
Yeah.
do that. So I'm like, why can't I extend that same immediate grace to these people? And like, how do I navigate that? And so we ended up buying, I ended up like on my Instagram posting something being like, this is happening. I'm going to buy some pads while I'm here. And I did like basically a 24-hour fundraiser and used that money to buy pads. And then I gave them to this woman in the slum. And I was like,
Right.
distribute
Yeah.
however you want to, instead of me being the one being like, hello, I'm the American who's here to save you all. But when I got back and then raised a bunch of money and got in, or this menstrual cup company got in contact with me and wanted to partner with us.
Wait,
So
did they
then,
contact you?
yeah, it's
Whoa.
called,
Okay, I
yeah,
didn't realize that. Yeah.
it's this company called Could You Cup, and they do like a buy one, give one model.
Mm.
And so we raised a bunch of money, and then she has someone in Kenya or someone who had a bunch of cups. So then
Mhm.
we like sent her money, and then she gave a bunch of cups to those girls. And then we before we went the second time, we raised more money, bought more cups, and then brought them
Right.
and like offered them up as compensation for being interviewed. And even the cup thing was a bunch of people told us that that would be like culturally insensitive to introduce something like a cup where you'd have to insert it. But so I also was talking to some of my friends there. I'm like, should I not do this? Are they not going to like it? I heard it might be like a taboo for the culture. And this one woman was like, girl, they would much rather insert a freaking menstrual cup than a man when they're on their period. And I was like, okay,
That's a
yeah,
good point.
that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Anyways, They love the menstrual cups. And like as often as we can, we send more money to them to get more cups and like give cups to them when we can. That woman in Kenya is like our strongest contact that we have kept through this. And she came with us to Malawi and Eswatini to do research. And it yeah, so she's like part of it all too. And we gave her more cups to bring back to Kenya when she came with us too.
Right. Well, and what were some of the big differences that you were seeing between Kenya and then Eswatini and Malawi?
Yeah. So Malawi's like a really, really, really poor country. And Eswatini, Eswatini, no one really knows where that is. It's called Swaziland. It's
Mhm.
like touches South Africa. And it was when people think of AIDS, maybe you think of all of Africa, but South Africa is where the AIDS crisis hit most. And
Mhm.
Eswatini has the highest rate of AIDS in the world of their population. So that was like interesting for the research because if people are trading sex for pads, then they're probably transmitting HIV by doing that and then getting AIDS. Um, so that is why we picked Eswatini. And there's a lot of Nazarene connections there. And since I work through the school and the nonprofit, it just is easy to coordinate. When you like are going to a foreign country, if you were to just like plop down and go door to door asking about periods, that probably won't go very well. So going to like a community that is from there, much better. So that's why we went there. But the demographic of people is really, really young. Everyone's like my age because all their parents
Right.
died from AIDS. So
Right.
most of them are orphans. So it's a really young demographic. And basically, everyone is on some form of birth control, usually like an implant or something. And also, they're taking PEPFAR, which is like a if you take it's a preventative, I think, but also if you take it, it like reduces the symptoms. You can take it if you get AIDS, you'll die. If you have HIV, your symptoms are curable or at least like
Right.
hidable. And
Manageable with the medication.
yeah.
Got it.
So, and if like this is a whole other thing other people could get into. I'm not going to fully get into it, but like the original plan was basically if this whole generation stayed on PEPFAR and then like their kids, people in my generation right now are testing negative for HIV, even though they had it at one point because it's
Hmm.
that like away. Basically, their kids wouldn't have it, HIV, but they were relying on a lot of USAID funding for that. So that like, so that
I
doesn't
didn't
like,
even think about that piece of this whole thing. I mean, I
yeah.
was like kind of thinking about it, but then I was like, oh, but like you're researching, so it doesn't really, but like that whole element of it, I didn't like, oh,
So that's a whole other thing, but
yeah.
that everyone was on that and was on birth control. So a lot of people knew a lot about sex and their periods in Eswatini. And the Eswatini is a really small country, so like the wealth gap is not as big at all. Big is not as big. People are kind of relatively the same level of poverty. A lot of girls there kind of would like laugh at the idea of transactional sex with some random man, but they would talk about how all of them had boyfriends who are usually a lot older than them. And they're like, they buy me anything I want when I ask for it. And you're like, well, what do you want? And you think they're going to be like, I get my nails done and my hair done and all these things. They're like, I get my electricity paid for and pads. So there's like a different version of transactional sex for basic needs that's happening
Mm-hmm.
in Eswatini. Also in Malawi, we were in the northern part of Malawi, which is super rural. The country is like just very poor. There's like one main road that goes from northern to southern Malawi. And like we got to the airport and then got in a car and drove like 8 hours
Yeah.
north on a road that was only done halfway and the other half was dirt.
Yeah.
So it's very poor country. There I we were seeing a lot of women who didn't know about their period, similar to a lot of Kenyan women, but there's a lot of like witchcraft that happens in Malawi. So a lot of beliefs about blood and like their period. If anyone gets if a witch gets access to your period blood, they curse you and um basically ruin all chances of fertility. A lot of the witchcraft stuff is attached to a woman's ability to give birth and have children, and that is like a woman's purpose in a lot of the world, especially Malawi. So it's really dangerous to like have a pad left out or anything like that. Kind of the main thing that was happening with these girls in Malawi, in northern Malawi, basically they get their period. No one knew what it was before they had it for the first time. They get their period, they see blood or something, they're freaking out, and they go tell their mom or grandma. But if they tell their mom's like, go talk to your grandma or aunt about this. You can't talk to me about it. So then she goes and tells grandma or aunt, she's like, I'm bleeding. I don't know what's going on. And then that person says, okay, you need to isolate in this room for 7 days. Don't leave except to go and bathe yourself in the river really early in the morning at like 4 in the morning, but don't talk to anyone or touch anyone. If anyone tries to talk to you, don't look at them, like run away. You can't interact with anyone. And they still don't
Yeah.
explain what's going on. And then
Yeah.
at the end of their period, they're like, okay, you now are gonna, this is gonna happen once a month. And if you have sex or if you let a boy touch you now, you're gonna get pregnant. So just stay away from boys. And also don't touch any of these foods and don't sleep in the same bed with your husband when you're on your period and don't put salt on food. And then that's what they get. And then they proceed. A lot of those women too were taught, they put like these big rags in between their legs and tie a rope around them when they're on their period. Most of them didn't have underwear or they had like only one or two pairs. So
Mm-hmm.
they couldn't even use pads. They had tried making reusable pads also, but the material would like chafe their skin similar to the rags. It wasn't much better and would give them really bad infections because they don't have enough clean water to thoroughly wash them out. But they like love the menstrual cups when we offered them to them. And I had a lot of women like super beg crying for extra for their daughters and granddaughters and stuff because are game changing. And it's just like one
Yeah.
of the saddest and happiest moments talking to a woman and she's like, can I swim with one of those? Can I dance? Can I jump? Can I sleep? I can do anything I want to do just with that cup while I'm on my period. And you say, yeah. And they're like, give me one. When we were in Malawi, there was one woman who's like, I can just put it in if I'm on my period. And we're like, yeah. And she ran outside, squat down, put it in, came back in. She was like, I did it. It was easy. And we were like, hell yeah, girl.
Yeah.
And everyone was like whooping and cheering and so excited. So yeah, they loved that there. But um I haven't done a proper like comparison of them of these African countries yet. But there is also in Malawi, because we asked if there's anyone who trades sex for pads and where you live. In Kenya, people were like, yeah, it happens everywhere all the time. It's horrible and unavoidable, and we wish we didn't have to do it. But it totally happens. Most women would not talk about themselves. They would like often talk about a friend, and you could tell they were talking about themselves or something like that. But in Malawi, I would ask that question and they'd be like, oh, no, 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 I've never heard of that. And then I was getting that answer a lot of times. And then eventually I was like, okay, I know I'm not supposed to like push this because it's research, but are you sure? Like you've never heard about this? I'm not asking this because I'm judging you. I'm asking this because I've heard of
Yeah.
it happening in this place, this place. This is a story. This is a story.
Yeah.
And nobody knows it's happening. And since nobody knows, nobody cares. And we want people to care. And then slowly I had women be like, we can't tell you because we don't want it to get back that we like told on some of these girls that are doing it. We don't want to like it's secret. We're not supposed to talk about those kinds of things. And so then eventually someone were like, yeah, it does happen here. For sure it happens here. one of our translators, even, she was like, when I was like 16, I had a boyfriend who was a lot older than me. And he was my boyfriend because his dad owned this shop. And every month I got to pick two things from the shop. And I would pick a pack of pads and a pack of like ibuprofen. And that's why he was my boyfriend. And I stayed his girlfriend for a really long time until
Yeah.
eventually I stopped. But that's why I was.
Yeah. So it's just like it's the same story but ever so slightly different. I really want to hear about Mexico because
Yeah.
I'm like, oh gosh, I'm like so curious.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the initial reason we went to Mexico too, I was in a museum in San Diego in like December, and I
Hmm.
saw this portrait of a woman with these iguanas on her head, and the thing said Lady of the Iguanas, and underneath it said that women in the Zapoteco culture in Juchitan, Oaxaca, experience an elevated level of society because it's a matriarchy. And so I was like, whoa, I wonder if in
Oh.
a matriarchy there's a happy story about periods. So I went online. I'm like, what's it like to be on your period in Oaxaca? No information. So then I basically did the thing where I reached out to all these random connections, and then we figured it out. And I went with my friend and a Point Loma student, and we went to Oaxaca and we did the whole thing there. Um, and Oaxaca is um, it's definitely like a way wealthier. It's the wealthiest place we've been by
Yeah,
far.
that's kind of what I was wondering because I'm like thinking that versus like slums of Kenya and like obviously there's a lot more than
It's
like
Mexico, which
yeah.
has really high and really low income levels. There's a really big income disparity. And in Oaxaca, there's a like really strong indigenous presence still from a couple different indigenous groups. Like Mihe was the one that we interacted with a lot in like Oaxaca City, but also Zapotec people. And
Hmm.
they're all like people. I feel like even my mind forgot this, where I just recognized how ignorant I was, but Mexico was like ancient Aztec Mayan people, Aztecs, Mayans, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, it like Spanish is not a native dialect to Mexico. That was from the Spanish conquistadors that came and colonized.
Mm.
So, like Spanish not being the native Mexican dialect is weird for my brain to wrap around because I feel like Spanish is what is part of being Mexican. But um, so a lot of these people that we were talking to didn't even speak Spanish because their communities didn't really fully get touched by colonialism, which is cool.
Wild.
So they were speaking like really ancient languages that are like sound more like any like Native American indigenous language,
Hmm.
which is kind of like a trippy being like, whoa, this sounds like something I've heard of in such a different context in Mexico. But so that was most of the people we were talking to, was people like really up in the mountains, really far away from cities and stuff. And honestly, there was mostly much happier stories, which was really awesome. Like
Yeah.
deep in these mountain towns that were like 3 hours away from civilization, they were like, in the question, are pads accessible? They're like, yeah, the stores are always stocked with them. Where like in
Mm.
Malawi, in like this one community, in most communities, but in this one community, they're like the closest store is 10 kilometers away, and sometimes they have like 2 packs of 8 pads, sometimes, but they're not ever stocked. So that was like big difference. And they were cheaper in Mexico than they are in Malawi, which is insane.
Interesting. That's
Insane.
that is, but that's yeah, that's really interesting.
So like most women, not all women, but most women, when we asked how like are they cheap or expensive, they're like they're pretty cheap. Like you can get pretty cheap ones. Yeah. And a lot where it's in Malawi, Kenya, or Eswatini, people are like cheap. Are you kidding me? No, they're so expensive. But even in the
Hmm.
US, you ask any of your friends like, do you think pads are or tampons are cheap, they're gonna be like, no, they're freaking expensive. Pads and tampons are expensive. So that's awesome that they're so cheap there. And most kids learn about it, their period, when they're like 8 in school, which is really awesome. They're not, most aren't taught like all of the stuff, and most still, when they see blood in their pants, they're like, what is going on? But their moms are usually like, you learned about this, remember it's your period? And they're like, I didn't think it would be like this. But there is a higher level of acceptance. But one story that we were hearing a lot about is how in the Zapotec culture, which is this matriarchal society we were hoping to see really happy things from, our parents' generation were getting their periods much younger than the generation before. And so
Oh,
they,
interesting.
interesting like biological stuff,
Yeah.
but they were, their parents didn't know what it was, and they assumed that their daughters were losing their virginities instead of getting, they thought that's what was happening. That's why they were bleeding. So a lot of girls were getting punished, like beaten for this happening, because they thought they weren't virgins and then not eligible for marriage. So then some parents started marrying off their daughters when they were like really, really young to avoid them bleeding before they get married, so that no one would think that they had lost their virginity before they got married. So
Mhm.
girls were getting married at like 10 years old. Um, so that like happened to like our parents' age, that was happening, but it's
Got it.
not really happening as much anymore. But there was like one woman who I talked to who she got her period when she was like 9, really young, and her mom beat her because she thought she was having sex, and she tied her up in their house, and her neighbors had to come over to stop her mom from beating her, and they had to be like, this isn't, she did not lose her virginity, this is a period. And when talking to her, she was like, I've never talked to anyone about my period since then because I don't want anyone to ever judge me ever like my mom did. So those stories still exist, really big and bold, but happier situation in Mexico for sure.
Hmm.
We brought, so I got in contact with the CEO of Salt, the cup company based in Idaho.
Yeah.
Really awesome company. And they gave me a really big donation, and we gave some of them to in Mexico,
Yeah.
but not all of them. Also, something that was really awesome is one of the things we were saying is like, you can buy these in Mexico. They're available at the store. We have them if you want one, but if you can afford it, they're pretty expensive. They're pretty cheap here in
Hmm.
like relatively. If you can afford it, please don't take one, and we'll give one to someone who really needs them. And a lot of women were like, "Oh yeah, go give that to someone who needs one. I'll go buy one," which is really awesome to like,
That's cool to hear.
yeah, because I don't like passing up on free things, you know, but
Yeah.
like
Yeah, but yeah, no, that's cool. Especially and just like, I mean, from the economic side of that as well. Of just
exactly.
like, okay, like they're able to say no because it's not something that's like an overbearing expense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of, but a lot of women like them. There was one community though that we gave them out in, and a lot of every woman wanted one, and they
Hmm.
asked for their daughters, and we gave a couple extra. But after we were leaving, this nurse who was doing like a public health thing while we were there, she was like, I like, you probably shouldn't have given them out because of the, they're gonna go home and show their husbands, and because of the like just really strong machismo culture in that area, their husbands are gonna be like, I don't know what that is, so I don't want it in the house, and they'll have to throw them away and get rid of them. And I was like,
Mm.
oh. That's like an, I don't know what to do with that. I don't know how to avoid that or how to fix that. I'm just like, well, I hope that doesn't happen, but if it does, so, but I mean, that's with all of this, you never know for sure, like if people are going to fully love them. But I do, like today, I just got a text from one of our translators in Malawi who, she was just in one of the villages that we had went to. And I got a really great report back from her saying that a lot of the women, most of the women are still using them. They still like them. They want to get more for their community, Also, everyone knows how much they go for at stores now because they're looking for them. They're really expensive, like super expensive there, but
Mm-hmm.
great feedback. So it's always good to hear that people actually like them and are using them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is cool. The continents are like
Mhm.
you're stringing them together. What is
And
going on? What?
on that part too, actually, in Oaxaca, this was like one of the coolest things ever. I was in this community of women who did not speak Spanish, and I was conducting all the interviews in Spanish, and then they were getting translated to the indigenous dialect. But they asked me if I would ask all the questions in English and then translate them to Spanish and then to their dialect because they had never heard English before and they wanted to hear it. They were really old ladies and they were really nice. But at the end, they were like, okay, you said you did this in other countries. Can you tell us the stories of those women and show us photos of the women? So I got to like tell these women up in the hills in Oaxaca about Maasai women from Kenya. And they're like looking at these women, being like, they're so beautiful and they look so different. And they also love color the same way that we do. And our stories are so different and so similar. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Bringing all these stories like everywhere. And then them being like, are you going to share our stories like this? And I'm like, yes, I will. I will.
That's cool.
It's super cool.
Yeah, and just I mean, A, that they're asking, but then the fact that yeah, you can just like they can see the similarities too, and then just be like, yeah, like have that common connection
Yeah.
across the different continents and like
Mhm.
wildly different cultures, but also like similar in some way. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Oh, I was just gonna ask about the London conference because that sounds like
it
big.
is big, but I just have the worst imposter syndrome ever. So I feel like all this is small. I feel like I'm like cheating at life. It's my, I, I'm working full time doing like my dream, this job that was created from someone who believes in me so much to just like do the thing I'm the most passionate about. And I'm like, this can't be real because I love it so much. So how can this be like a real job? So like this thing in London,
Yeah.
it's a conference about menstrual health and hygiene that I just kind of was like, let me see if my research means anything to anyone. And then they said yes. So I'm going to this conference in London to talk about it. I've never presented at a conference outside of like Point Lomas. I did the Point
Yeah.
Loma, but yeah, I research is a really hard realm and it's really tricky to navigate. I've been trying to get published on the like studies of our different countries. And you can only submit to like one journal at a time, which is
Right.
tedious
Yeah.
process. And also, I have been rejected. The first journal I got rejected from was a political science journal. And they said, this is for or this is like for more anthropology or public health. So then I submitted it to an anthropology journal and they're like, this is more global health. And the
Mhm.
qualifications for global health and public health stuff, I'm like, I'm not, it's
That
just,
sounds like a lot of,
I, it just
yeah,
gets thrown around a lot. And
yeah.
I gotten like really positive feedback on my paper. They're like, this is really awesome. It just doesn't belong in this compartment. It just doesn't fully belong anywhere because it is such, it's really heavy storytelling because there is like biological
Mhm.
research that needs to be done on periods for sure. But my groove that I'm focused on is just like the stories about menstruation and what it's
Well,
like to.
and like to me, I'm like, that's the compelling piece of it because if you're
Ah,
telling, I mean, like, yes, from like an academic side and like getting published, I can see the charts and the graphs and all of that. But like, as something that you're also just trying to get to the general public as well, it is the stories that are actually going to compel people to be like, oh my gosh, whoa, that's crazy. Like, seeing this as a statistic somewhere, I think. I would be shocked, but it is about the people behind it as well. And I think that's what's interesting about what you're saying about like the anthropology and the public health articles, because in my head when you do say it like that of like it is very story focused, I'm like, oh yeah, I could see how that like fits a little bit into the anthropology, but then also like with the like kind of like final outcome of what you're trying to do, it's very public health
totally.
oriented and like yeah, like it is a hard middle ground of like trying to figure out like, okay, how do you like where do you actually put this in like the scientific like research article community? I'm curious if like that's something that like at this conference you'll be
Yeah.
able to be like, and
Yeah. Like,
looking
can
for
you
advice on this. Like,
also all of like my and yeah, all of like my research ventures in the US, like all the different like PhD programs I was looking at, the Fulbright and like the
I see where this is
grants that
going.
would have funded the
Shoot.
like government grants that would have funded all of this is
Right.
like
Yeah.
deleted, void, no. So I'm like, okay, well, really time to like look in Europe and see what's going on over there. Even so, Could You Cup, that company that
Hmm.
helped with the cups, they had a huge grant from USAID to start a production facility in I think in Kenya or Rwanda to make cups. Everything approved. They had they like had all the licenses, they had the location, they had made an order for like over $1 million grant. And then they just got an email that was like, just kidding, never mind. And she was like, oh my gosh, like so yeah, the whole like the research thing, but like the academic side of it and the government funded like USAID public health stuff in the US that I was like kind of hoping to like the State Department, all those things that I was like, these are the places that I'm going to get in there and work in there and work my way up. So then they care about all these things. They just like don't exist anymore. So yeah. So I'm hopeful about asking these European experts for some help and guidance. Also, I like obviously there's a level of I want to get some credit. I like want don't want to be left behind with all this work. But
Yeah.
my main goal is for like this work to be like super scalable and for people to care about and want to do. So
Hmm.
I honestly am like, I feel like I'm throwing this at people and I'm like, just like take it and do something really awesome and big with it so that the world cares about this and something changes globally, like on a personal level. So like dads aren't afraid to talk to daughters about their periods and like moms aren't afraid to talk to daughters, and on a global level where like maybe we give free pads instead of condoms or we cut that budget in half and give both, like I don't need my name attached to it, but I really just want someone who knows how to make it matter, just make it matter.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm struggling to figure that out, but we're taking slow steps.
It's gonna get there. And like, I mean, you're also just at a place now too where you have been to multiple places and it's like you have the research under your belt where it's like even a year ago, you wouldn't be in the place that you're in today. Yeah. Well, and like when it comes to like the media side of things too, like I know you've done some media work, but like I know that you were talking about trying to get more involved with that and like get more people on board with it. So how's that coming along too?
Yeah. We're, so my like focus that I kind of really want to go into is more broadcasting the stories in like documentary and photojournalism, sort of. Um, because that I think that's what gets people, that's what I like the most and what other people
Hmm.
like the most. And like I told you, I'm a sucker for a National Geographic documentary, and my
Hmm.
dream would be for people to watch videos about what it's like to be on your period on all these different in all these different regions and countries as much as I watch shark documentaries on National Geographic. That's like I would love that to happen. Um I am working with this nonprofit in San Diego right now called the Period Poverty Project, and
Hmm.
we have been in the beginning stages of making a documentary in San Diego about period poverty in San Diego, and we like had a team together, but the girl who's gonna be a videographer for us got her dream job in New York, so she was like, just kidding, I can't help you with this. But it's really hard to find a freaking documentary team. So yeah,
Well,
basically
and
we're back
I
to
mean, it's really interesting too because like I yeah, you think with that kind of stuff it's easy, but I think it's also just been interesting from like the podcast of like interviewing all of these women and
yeah.
talking especially about it in like more the sports realm,
Mhm.
but quite simply like it's the same in any film like where it's like okay, you have an idea and you have to make it happen and the odds are none of it's going to be funded until it's done.
Yeah, and that's
Which like seems like so backwards in my head, especially since no matter what project it is, like whether it's like a period story and like you're making like a period documentary and like going around and doing this, like that's going to be valuable for some company or some organization. And so then I'm just like, why can't you like put a little bit of money up front? Like it doesn't have to cover the whole thing right off the bat, but like it's going to be something that's valuable. And then like also looking in that and like in the sports world where like you have a bazillion sporting in just like companies and like literally any media about like your product or your product in it and then like having like a really cool story behind it, like that's gonna make you money and make you look good. And so why not just put a little bit of money towards the beginning of it? I don't
yeah,
know.
our
I don't get
totally,
it.
totally
Yeah.
our thing. We have a little bit of money. The nonprofit has a little bit of money,
Yeah.
but we don't have any gear or the
Yeah.
like skill set to make a documentary because we just have this idea, but we can't afford to like hire on a professional film person. But I also don't like, I'm like, how it makes sense because we're not like selling something that like gets a consumer hooked or something. But it blows my mind how much money there is in like AI ads and like I don't know, all these like crazy big, just these things that don't matter very much, and how there's just so much money. I worked at this like small marketing firm for a little bit and I just took photos, and I got paid so much money from them to like take pictures at a restaurant, and I have no experience, and they were just like throwing money at me, and I'm like, this is dumb. Why do you have this money to do nothing with, and why can I not get enough money to do something that matters? Like, why does no one
Hmm.
care about that?
Yeah.
Ah, anyways, but yeah, it's the storytelling thing. It's hard because I'm not a videographer. That's not what I am. I want someone who is, to say, "Hi Emma, I love your idea. Please let me do it with you." Um, but yeah, I'm hopeful that it'll move along a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and what's the next step in, because I know you're talking about India this
Mhm,
summer. Is that
mhm,
still on the table and happening?
mhm. So there's a couple places in the summer that are kind of on the dock. Things move very quickly when it all comes together, but
Mm.
they're in India. There's this hospital that we have a connection with that we could potentially work with and have like the nurses help with a lot of public health education and also help with the research process. And in India, that would be a really great location to do like a randomized control trial where we measure the difference between an area that has access to something versus doesn't, something like that, because we would have those nurses there for a long time. But another place we're working on is in Peru, just because it's another place we have connections. And not to like fully give away this really great project that we're working on, but we're working on a really great project. And the Peru has this has regenerative organic cotton farming, and that's something that we want to like
Okay.
look into. Um, that's in Peru and in India, both of
Got
those.
it.
So kind of want that to be part of it. Also, um, with Nazarene Compassion Ministries, they have a hospital in Papua New Guinea. And so they're like, would you be willing to go to Papua New Guinea to like do some menstrual health education stuff and also do your interviews. I'm like, yeah, give me an invite there and I'll go to it basically. And Philippines is the last location where we have, and basically like NCM people who are like, I heard you're doing this and we want you to do it here because it's a problem here and we want people to know about it.
Mm-hmm.
So those are our next locations. So basically it's a lot of me reaching out to a lot of people and trying to coordinate things and having students. We like have students go and like lead a lot of the research so that they can get experience, and so that it's really nice to have lots of people help doing a lot of the tedious stuff, like getting all the licenses to go do research somewhere. And then they also write a paper on it that can be used for publication. And then we can also use like do like a cross analyzation of all these different countries. So yeah, lots of coordinating steps are happening right now.
Got it. Yeah. It's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah, and it's kind of all confusing and up in the air all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, but then also now it's like, yeah, it is all confusing and up in the air, but then like you do have the momentum. And so
Yeah.
like I'm like, okay, I'm really like this time next year, like, what will this look like? I don't know, but I'm excited about it.
I'm hoping by this time next year, we will have hit all four hemispheres.
Hmm. Well, and I mean, like, what does kind of your 5-year plan for this look like? Like, best case scenario, 5 years.
Best case scenario, 5 years. There is a fleshed out research study plus visual storytelling thing, like documentary,
Hmm.
in 7 different countries,
Hmm.
um, with a cross analysis on all of these countries, saying, look at all these different countries, look at how they are unique in the experiences of menstruation, and look how they are similar, and
Hmm.
look how there's a straight, very clear line of what the issue is and what the need is and where the help can go. And that to like the dream plan is be like, here you go, UN, do something with this. Or to be like, here you go, the History Channel, do something with this. Or here you go,
Yeah.
USAID, but
Yeah.
like for there to be this a lot of, yeah, this like established thing where this information is there, and it's like, you big dogs, look at this, also world, look at this real thing that happens everywhere, see yourself in all of these women's experiences, and also see how they're different in all these experiences. And yeah.
Yeah. Sounds super possible. It is possible. That's what will be done. That's what you're gonna have in 5 years.
Mhm. Yeah. And I think the goal too is that like support and advocacy could help um fund like local initiatives, but also, tiny tangent I'm going to go off on here. Initially, when thinking about like period poverty, how do we fix this issue? I feel like in the international development sphere, the answer is like, how do we make a microfinance opportunity out of this? How do we have like a
Yeah, totally.
like project happen that where like we can give people jobs and they can make something that stimulates the economy? So I think that's why a lot of like the first wave period poverty things were like sewing projects where people make reusable pads and sell them. Everywhere I have been, women don't like them.
I
They
was
like,
just about to ask that. Like, I mean,
yeah,
if I were given the option any day, if you're like, do you want a pad or do you want a cup? Cup. Duh.
yeah.
Like,
Well,
of course.
there's definitely scenarios where people physically can't use them and don't want to use
Uh-huh.
them. Like in a lot of parts of Africa, in Kenya, female genital mutilation where women get cut, that's a whole thing you
Whole
should
other
look
side tangent.
at.
Yeah.
That like they can't insert a cup probably because
Yeah.
that would be very painful and just not work, whatever. Like that. And there's some, like my mom doesn't use a cup because she doesn't want to use a cup, and my mom has had plenty of babies, and she, like, but she's like, I don't want to do that, I want to use tampons and pads. Okay, mom, sure, you can do whatever you want to do. But they're like reusable pads, they take a lot of water to wash, they like smell pretty easily, you have to have a lot because when it's all like it's all absorbed, you have to use another one. So they just like
Mhm.
don't make as much sense. But it was a really good idea. Like women can sew these and sell them and jobs, all those things. But my mind is kind of having this shift of like, okay, I don't think maybe period products should be treated the same way we treat like, people buy like towels that were crocheted by women and like in rehab and all these different places. And it's like these beautiful
Yeah.
artistic things. Maybe period products shouldn't be considered in that light. And maybe we should think of them the same way we think of like malaria medication. Like we don't think of, okay, how do we get this community in the middle of rural Kenya to come up to make their homemade malaria medication? No, that's like a public health basic need that we're just going to provide because we have the technology to do. So I think that like maybe things like a cup and pads made with like good ingredients that are good for the environment should be like a free public resource instead of something we look to like turn into a microfinance venture. So
No,
hope
I think that goes back to some points that you were making earlier too. And like, it is like you do just need to treat it like
yeah,
it is a part of healthcare because it
yeah,
is
because it's part of health.
healthcare.
Yeah,
It's part
exactly.
of healthcare.
Like
And like it's
toilet
not
paper
like
is free. Why is like
I don't think that, I mean, I could be wrong here, but I don't think that the UN is trying to turn like condoms into a
oh, that's the other
microfinance
thing.
project. And so
That
like
one's
would
like
you like put yeah, like yes.
even like people, one of the things with periods too, that's lots of people are like, we don't like do distributions of pads and like all these things because it's so bad for the environment because so many of them get just like thrown on the streets and stuff. Totally true. So they don't include pads in like crisis care kits or like
Yeah.
they just like don't because they're like it's bad for the environment or they don't fund like pad distributions because it's bad for the environment, but like there's still condoms everywhere, like all on the streets and everywhere. There's condoms everywhere. I see more condoms than I do pads, and nobody is like, how do we make condoms more environmentally conscious? Like that's
Well,
literally
and
it's a plastic
also
baggie. That's so bad. Like
yeah. And but then also going back to okay, like if maybe a cup is your primary option, like if most people are going for that option, other than like people that might opt out of it, but like if that's more your primary focus, it's like you're not going to leave that on the street because it's not a one-time use thing. So then this goes into like the whole sustainability conversation
yeah,
of
it
like,
is the most sustainable thing also.
right,
Like yeah, and it only needs really high quality cups like the salt cup. They can last for up to 30 years, which is like your basically your whole period. And
right.
you need like a tiny bit of clean water or to just like rinse it, or you can just boil it over water and it's clean. And
Yeah.
it's like made with it's made with a antibacterial silicone. So like no diseases, no all these things. It's like just it's the best option in my opinion for if you want to think of a sustainable period option. But and I've used one since I was like 14. So I love it.
Yeah.
The disc I think is also a great alternative to the cup. Also equally as sustainable.
Yeah.
Anyways, not to get
Period
on.
chat.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my favorite things about this too is I like my group of friends here, like all those girls we talk about girl stuff all the time. We're very open with our bodies and all those things. And I was on my way to a wedding a few weeks ago talking
Mhm.
about um it was the day I got back from or the morning that morning I had gotten back from Mexico and that night we were driving to a wedding. It was
Oh my
really
gosh.
it's horrible. No. But we're like talking about all this stuff and they're like, what are they like they were like asking all what these women's stories were like. And I was like, oh my gosh, you guys are like my best friends. And I've been doing this for like 4 years and I don't know what you did about your first period. And in the car, everyone talked about the story of their first period. And I was like, it's still crazy that I haven't asked this question to every single one of my girlfriends. And I'm talking about how I like want to make this so normal and whatever. And even in my own community, I don't know all of my friends' first period stories. And I'm like, this is just so crazy how that just the social norms exist so deeply. And I even this thing that I care about so much, I like, I don't know.
It's so true, but also I think I because it is still taboo, and it's
So
also one of those
taboo.
things that for most of us, like it was a kind of horrifying experience. Like for me, I was in I I was in like I think like seventh grade or something. I don't even like fully remember. I feel like I blocked this out because it was horrible. And I like was on, it was like over Thanksgiving and my family went to Hawaii and I think it was like on the airplane that like my period might have started, but I was like, oh, like no big deal. I don't really know what's going on. Like this seemed just like something that's like a little issue, but like whatever. And then I like didn't think about it. And then I think it was like when we finally got back to the hotel and I was like, oh my gosh, like there's even more blood in my underwear. Like what the heck is going on? And then I was like, wait a second, like I don't want this to like ruin the family vacation. And then I like went into my parents' room and was like crying and I was like, I think my period started and we're in Hawaii. And then 2 days later I got food poisoning.
Oh
It
God.
was like it was probably like maybe one of the most traumatic weeks of my entire life. Yeah.
Oh,
Because then I was like, man, like, I mean, like, there's also just like the reality of like once your period does start, like, you have to deal with it
yeah,
forever.
every forever,
Yeah.
basically.
And so I remember that feeling of like, oh my gosh, I'm literally gonna have to deal with this forever. And then I got food poisoning like a day later. Yeah. And then I was on my period and had food poisoning.
That's horrible.
And it was bad.
That's horrible.
Yeah.
My first period was so insignificant. I wish it like was a bigger deal, but I literally like I got home from dance class. I was in the bathroom. I saw like brown in my underwear and I was like, Mom, come up here. My mom like comes upstairs and I'm like, I think I started my period. And she's like, you did? And I was like, okay. And she's like, you know how to do everything, right? I'm like, yeah, I do know how to do everything. I already read The Care and Keeping of You, Mom. Thanks.
Man, yeah, no, I did not. I did not have that experience. I was in full
Mine
panic.
was easy. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, I have like traumatic bleeding through tampon stories, but yeah, my
Yeah.
first period was just like,
And this is why we use cups now.
yes,
No more traumatic tampon stories.
traumatic tampon stories.
Yeah. Yeah, no, those are bad. Okay, I need to plug in my computer super quick. I forgot to grab. There it is. I should have just done this at the beginning. Ah, there it goes. Fantastic. Okay, now that, yeah, I feel like people need to talk about their period stories more.
Yeah, ask your friend about their first period story. Laugh about it with each other.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally. Get it. You want to know? Okay, my one of my old coworkers, I asked if we could get pads and tampons in the bathroom for free. Because it's great when you're in a bathroom and you're like, oh no, I just am bleeding in my pants right now. And then they have what you need, right? It's great.
Hmm.
So I was like, can we get them in this bathroom? It would be awesome. And my old manager was like, no, we can't do that because if we do that, then the boys will try to stick the tampons on the walls. And I was like,
Really?
what does that mean? What do you mean stick tampon? How do you
Like
stick a
stick the
tampon on a
tampons
wall?
on the
You know
walls?
what a tampon is? And he's like, I don't know. I just think they would do that. And I was like, okay, okay. And then someone else was like, no, we can't do that because then they're going to flush the tampons down the toilet and that's really bad for plumbing. And I'm like, no, because if they need a tampon, they're going to put one in. They're not, if they are going to throw it away in the toilet, they're already going to do that, whether or not you have tampons in there. Ugh.
That
Anyway,
is all fantastic points.
right? Sticking
Yeah.
tampons on walls.
I like
Okay.
that one. I'd love to see how that could be done, actually. Actually, I don't want to think about that. That would be quite a bathroom to walk into. Um, Also, I think we're getting into like an hour and a half here.
Okay.
Um, where can people find everything
Okay. Ready?
ready?
AKINY.net. Bam.
Amazing.
It'll take you right to it. Yeah. And you, there's like like if you want to tell me your story, go for it. If you have an idea for me, go for it. If you just want to watch, go for it. There's like a contact thing that people can write into, and there's so few people filling that out, so I promise I'm looking every day waiting for someone to be like, hello, I care about this, and I'll respond to you. That's where people can go right now. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Amazing. Does it have an Instagram yet? I feel like it
No,
does. It doesn't?
it
Okay.
doesn't. I should really
Instagram
make it
needs to.
Instagram.
You should
I'll
make
make
an
an Instagram.
Instagram.
That'll be my, I'll do that tomorrow. I'll do that before you make this a podcast. I'll have an Instagram.
Okay, beautiful. Yeah. I feel like an Instagram could go a long ways.
For sure. I'm just not Instagrammy myself, but I
I
know I
know.
should.
That's the hard part. It
Uh
kind of sucks you into your phone.
huh.
Yeah. Do you have any other stories to leave people with?
Any other stories to lead people with? I feel like I shared a lot. Um, I should leave with a good. Well, I feel like now would be a time to leave with like a really happy story because I want to leave on a happy note, but I don't really know a lot of most of my stories are really traumatic about all of this. Um, oh, I'll share a little tiny happy story. In This is just a happy little anecdotal thing. In Kawangware, which is a slum in Kenya that we've done most of the work in. Um, this was like kind of just a one-off comment that was made, and then she showed me like the hospital notes afterwards. But there's this service that picks up pregnant teenagers and drives them to the hospital to give birth.
Whoa.
Son brings them to the hospital, and they this Maureen is really involved with she's the lady I work with. She's just like really involved in the community. That service was like in the past 2 years, there has been a really, or like not 3 years, 2 years. There's been a really significant decrease in the amount of pregnant teenagers that we've been picking up from this community. You know what's going on? And she's like, the only thing that's different is we have like a lot of menstrual cups that we give out to all of our girls in our communities. And I was like, what? Oh my gosh. And then I was like, can you show me like, is this real or you just think this is happening? Like what's the deal here? And then she showed me hospital notes that are like show a significant decrease in this. And I'm like,
Whoa.
it's literally on a piece of notebook paper. So I don't know how to make people believe that, but
That's further down the line, you'll have those studies, but
sure.
that's like, I mean, the fact
But
that it's even being talked about is
just
like
to
it's
hear that
crazy.
just like makes my heart so excited and so hopeful for the like future. Actually, this isn't a story, but can I read you a poem?
Yes, please.
Okay. um, One thing I love to say about all of this work is I feel like the cycle that happens for me is I'm feeling really motivated. I do a lot of work. I am like, yes, we're moving. I'm like doing all that I can. We're going to dignify women's bodies and help them get all the things that they need. And then I'm trying really hard. And then I start to get a little bit exhausted. And I'm like, dude, I can't do anything. I'm just like a girl floating in this world, and there's nothing I can do to help, and no one cares. And I'm hearing a lot of no's, and nothing is happening. And then maybe for like one day, my brain's like, you know what? Screw this. I can't do anything. This is pointless. And I feel like clockwork. The next day, I start my period. And I'm like, ugh. And then I just like I always say it's the crimson wave, just that's like tsunamiing me into doing more work. And then I just go back into it. Anyways, because I can't forget about it every month because I get my own period. But this is a poem that I read often and circle back to usually in these moments and in conversations about it. It's called Poem in Praise of Menstruation by Lucille Clifton. Okay. If there's a river more beautiful than this, bright as the blood red edge of the moon, if there's a river more faithful than this, returning each month to the same delta, if there is a river braver than this, coming and coming in a surge of passion, of pain. If there is a river more ancient than this, daughter of Eve, mother of Cain and Abel, if there is in the universe such a river, if there is somewhere water more powerful than this wild water, pray that it flows also through animals, beautiful and faithful and ancient and female and brave.
Once again, thank you so much for listening in today. I really hope that you enjoyed this episode. Emma is such a solid human and just doing such incredible things. So make sure to check out everything that she is doing and stay tuned for more episodes in the following weeks.